I'll add this one just for me. Back in 1995, Francois Castaigne, our VP for engineering, wanted to get Chrysler more exposure in Europe in particular. And to do that, his view of it was to enter the very successful touring car series that runs, over in Europe. And so he wanted us to run a Stratus and a, what was the other? Sirius and Stratus.
Sure.
Yeah.
Whatever.
And we hooked up with Pac West, who raced out of Portland, I think it was. And we built these cars, and I was given the responsibility of developing that engine. So for that series, you used 2-liter as a maximum displacement. It had to have a production block and production head, and it was really based in a production engine, obviously. And you had an 8,000 RPM rev limit. So they tried to keep the cost down on the engine development side by putting these rules in. And in Europe, the best cars were probably the Renaults. They made about 300 horsepower, allegedly. And Francois had run the Renault program when he was back at Renault. So he was very familiar with the cars and the engines in that series. So anyway, long story short is that he put me on that program along with a couple of other guys who came with me over to Viper. And I learned more on that program than I learned anywhere else. I learned by doing, and how to make an engine make power. Francois arranged for me to take one of our engines over to France and run it on the Renault team's dyno to compare it to see how we really stacked up. And we had won the championship in North America the year before, so it was a natural thing. So we were setting up in the cell, and Francois told us, if Renault comes over there, go away. We don't want to have them know you guys were there. So that happened. We went over there, and their facility was inside the old F1 track at Magna-Cours. Okay. And they had a go-kart track outside that ran on the infield in Magna-Cours. And it was a mirror of the Formula One track. So we spent the rest of the day driving go-karts. But we finally did get the engine run on Renault's dyno, and it made about 320 horsepower, and they were making about 312. So they were really surprised that we could do that in the time that we had to do it. And Francois, being Francois, I could go to him and ask him a question about how do you do this or how do you do that, and he wouldn't tell me. He wanted me to learn for myself how to do this and that. So that's where I really learned to get every last little bit that was even close to being ready to run. So great program, and it all stemmed from racing, which is what Francois really pushed in his position anyways, to get everybody thinking out of the box.
Yeah, I'm not sure what to say about this thing because the only involvement I had, I ran the shop, but I wasn't involved with building the GTSR race cars. But I think we built 12, didn't we, in our shop? Total of 12 cars?
Yeah, at least.
I think that's what it was. And didn't we build a Le Mans winning car in our shop?
Petrelli built them all.
Yeah, we built the Le Mans winning car.
Adam was an order.
So, I mean, we really had a relatively small team, but we got a lot out of the small team, we really did. It's only a few mechanics and a few engineers, and the budgets were never that big. It's one thing about Chrysler, anytime we went racing, the budgets were minuscule. Whether it was NASCAR, whether it was drag racing, doesn't matter. You can look at the past history of Chrysler back to the 50s, and you'll see very small budgets, but really big, great outcomes. Now, how much winning did we do? Richard Petty, all the drag race programs, Postock, Saxa Martin, all these great names that recurred. And, we continued on with Viper. I mean, it's what you guys did with that team is pretty amazing, really amazing.
Yeah, that was
It's 2 championships.
after hours of work.
Yeah.
The whole racing program is after hours.
Right. And, you know, we were racing, okay, it's one thing, but that didn't shut down everything else.
Yeah.
You know, we were building production cars and trying to make good production cars and make improvements and restyling and everything else, and all with a very small team. Small, underfunded team. But we did the most, with the least. And that's Chrysler's theme, it's always been that way. But way back, I've never seen them overspend on any program. But you? No. It's just the way it was, you know, it's Chrysler. And that's why it makes a kind of a gritty, gutsy kind of a team. You know, people that are true enthusiasts. We don't have people that are refrigerator engineers who come in and work on Vipers. We don't have that. Everybody here is an enthusiast of some sort. All the best people were enthusiasts. And that's what made it. It really made Team Viper.
Well, again, they came from Team Shelby, came from racers, came from guys that were doing pro rally on weekends, it came from guys that were doing motorcycle races, it came from guys that were road racers, came from drag racers.
I'm a drag racer. So.
It came from the guys that had it in their heart, let's go do this crazy thing. And Chrysler at that time, if you got assigned to a project, at Chrysler at that time, and the project failed and just didn't have a future, you didn't either. I mean, you were looking from the outside in going, do I have a job? And you're knocking on doors, and if you had 90 days to figure it out, or you're gonna go work for Ford. So people that decided that they're gonna join Team Viper and they're gonna make this feasibility study happen, really put a lot on the line. Just to walk in the door and say, I think I've got some faith in this thing. I'll bet my mortgage on starting this little car company within a car company. And we didn't exist for the first couple of years. Viper did not exist. Because at the time, anything under $50 million budget rounded to zero. So Viper's budget was $49,999. Because at 50, the bean counters come in and start trying to figure out what you're doing. So we stayed under that $50 million and we put the first couple of prototype cars together, and we got upper management to say, hey, these guys know what they're talking about. Let's go do this. And we kind of walked back the day they said, let's go do this, and it was like, oh shit, this is real.
I'll go back to, I think the original question is, how did we figure out what to do with racing? Is when they talked about doing Viper and racing, they said we can't do the roadster like the rent-a-car people did. They had to have the coupe, and that's when Schoberg started basically pushing us to get a coupe ready. And I'll go into a lot of other details about that one later, but is that they said, okay, at that point in time, they talked about the racing program being two different levels. They're going to have like a gentleman, racing program, and then the serious stuff. So they said, well, we had a target, and I can't remember the exact numbers, but it was like, take the production engine, which was 400 horsepower, do what little you had to do, and make like 450. And then develop the real race motor. And so they said, okay, fine. With Dick's help, we came up with a camshaft, we put headers on it, and the first dyno run was 450. We said, well, we're done with that phase. Then basically got really serious about the race motor. Again, they had the higher compression stuff, and it evolved, to much less stock, but it was production based with the block and the heads. And in fact, in 1996, the race engines were being made out of what were our prototype tools. And we made some changes we were going to put into production, lighten up the block, because we all had a target to take weight out of that car for the 96.5 coupe. Well, we took a little too much out of the cylinder block, and we wanted to crack in bulkheads. It's like, we got production ahead of us. So the first 150 cars were made off of prototype tools that we borrowed back from the race guys. So you talk about production-based racing. But, you know, they eventually went with TWN. The Weber guys were, you know, the 10 throttle body intake manifolds and stuff like that. So it was production based. It involved like everything else. So, you know, it was very much a production series. And in fact, they told me at one of the Daytona tests that, you know, nobody had traction control and stuff like that back then. And one of the cars actually lost the spark plug, and the car was faster coming out of the corners. So it was kind of a poor man's traction limited system. They said because it didn't have the torque to be able to burn the tires to the ground. And we eventually did. We hired a guy by the name of Jerry Malico. And there's another name from drag racing days back in the Stone, Cook, and Woods and those guys. He and his brother Gary, identical twins, interesting pair to work with. Jerry became our engine design development guys, and he worked with all the other outsiders to make this thing special. And you know, they were working all kinds of fun stuff. And I think I've lost my train of thought. But he was the one who worked with, you know, the Weber guys to develop that trick intake manifold. And he went to all the races, all the development for the race teams. You know, like the Power Car, which apparently has one hell of a long straightaway in it. And he said they'd be sharing the track for Viper testing, or Viper testing with some of the Le Mans prototypes. Not quite the stuff of today, but some of the stuff back then. And he says it was hilarious. You have these, you know, the Vipers come out of the corner like hell on wheels. And he had one guy that actually blew up one of the prototype cars. Because he figured there's this monster of a Viper, and I got this prototype car. I can draft him down to the straightaway and pass him at the end. They pull out the pass and slow down. Tuck back in, pull out the pass, slow down, because we're out in the air. He said, this guy eventually decided, I'm gonna pass this Viper no matter what. Going into the turn at the end of the back straight, he pulled out, put his foot into it, and blew it up. And Jerry just laughed his ass off. And he's like, here we are with our, you know, production-based, you know, truck. And you know, we blew up one of the fancy cars. So, you know, we had fun with that stuff. We laughed about it a lot.
Well, that was the story of the Daytona 24. All the prototypes broke right at
Yeah. You know, and our marketing people, and I won't go too far with this one, but you know, we won Daytona outright. Production car had not won Daytona outright in like forever. And all the prototypes broke, and we won overall. Our marketing people weren't ready for it. They had advertising ready to win our class. But no one was ready to bring out the posters and the newspaper ads that said, we won Daytona. So what did they do? Nothing. It took them about a week to finally get their stuff together and make the big deal of it, because nobody expected us to win, especially overall. And it's nice being part of stuff. I only got to one race. And that was '97 when we won the first championship. So that was a good one to go to.
I think as a personal opinion, as Bill was saying, Chrysler's never had the budget for racing. All of that sort of stuff came from the top down. Somebody would be assigned a project. Okay, you're now the program manager, you're the PR guy and all this other stuff. You're gonna go out and put a race team together, you're gonna go out and win the 24 hours at Daytona. And if that kind of a system wasn't evolving, it got no coverage whatsoever. It got no assistance. We handed the corporation, Team Shelby gave them 2 national championships in the showroom stock endurance series. We won all sorts of pro rally championships. We won the Daytona, the Daytona overall, and they weren't ready for it because it hadn't come in the right direction. We fed this from the bottom up, and they still didn't figure out where it was coming from. If we didn't have somebody on top driving the show, there was nobody to get kudos and get his back slapped, you know, for a success. Oh, what do we do with that? You know, ignore it.
You know, Dick mentioned, you know, the original budget at $49,999. You know, fortunately, we had a couple of people, in our group, we had a purchasing coordinator, which was great because we didn't have to deal with all the buyers, as engineers. He said, give me the information you need, he'll go out. He also was very creative. There's a 96 Roadster out here, I don't know, it was a white one with the blue fang stripes. That was a special, and it was done for a reason, is to put the coupe into production. It was a $70 million budget. It's like, he said, we're gonna get audited for this one. So what can we do? 96 Roadster was done. It had the new chassis, it had the new exhaust, it had about half of what it needed. So they spent $35 million in 96 for the Roadster. The other $35 million was spent for the 96 and a half coupe. Below $50 million, rounded to zero. Creative accounting. I'm just a dumb engineer. I thought that was pretty cool. You done?
We're just gonna talk forever if we don't get this going.